We need to let go of the diet mentality. 98% of the time, I find a lot more success when people say, okay, I'm going to get off of this feast and famine roller coaster. I'm going to stop dieting and then overeating and dieting and overeating and dieting and overeating.
Right.
I'm just going to steadily take care of my body and flood it with nutrition, and the weight will come off over time.
This is Mind, Body Matters with Greg Rennie and Rob Reeford.
And welcome to another edition of Mind, Body Matters. I'm Rob Reeford. This guy here is Greg Rennie.
That's me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Last week on the show, on the Keep Talking episode, we were teasing. We weren't teasing our guest like we were teasing.
It may have sounded that way.
Yeah. But oh boy, did we ever have some laughs, because as I had mentioned in the Keep Talking episode, Greg, one of the most biggest searches on Google would be about weight loss and or diet and dieting, or how do I lose weight? These are big searches on that monstrous thing called Google. And today on the show, we've got a guy who has a different way of looking at how you can lose weight. And he doesn't like calling it a diet per se. It's more, in my opinion, I think from what you've told me, it's more involving the psyche of a person.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Dr. Glenn Livingston is on the show today, and he and I had a chat on the phone a while ago. And then I called up Rob right away, because we've talked about our weight gain. We talked about trying to lose weight, our emotional eating, all of these things. And I said, got a great guy. I just talked to him. He's going to be on the show. We're going to interview him. And he's a psychologist. So what's really cool about this, Rob, is that it's a psychologist that is going to talk about his own personal experience with weight loss, because he at one time was 300 pounds, lost that weight. And apparently he was the guy that was behind a lot of the packaging for food, making sure that the packaging is colorful and enticing. And then he shifted into the work that he's been doing the last number of years regarding overeating. And he's got a book called Defeat Your Cravings. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But yeah, you're right. A different look at our relationship with food, and a different way of looking at cravings and what we can do about them.
Cravings. Hang on.
I love that. I love that.
Anyway, tell me more about our guest today. Is his background? He's written a few books.
Yeah, he has. And so the book we're going to talk about is Defeat Your Cravings. Cravings. I'm craving.
There you go.
So Glenn is a psychologist, as I mentioned, and he was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. It was a consulting firm that serviced several Fortune 500 companies in the food industry. And his research was in all the major papers in the States, Rob. New York Times, Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times. He was on ABC and CBS Radio. And Dr. Glenn Livingston today is going to be on our show, Mind, Body Matters.
Please welcome to the Mind, Body Matters studio, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Well, where we start really today is where we start with most of the interviews is the mind and body is the focus of our podcast. And it's interesting how we get different opinions on what the mind is, depending who we're talking to, because we could be talking with someone that is on the spiritual side, and they say, well, mind is like the Buddhists see mind. And we also talk about the body. So we have guests that come on that talk about anything from, psychological issues to physical issues. But reading part of your book, the question I would ask really is, how is the mind and body connected when we engage in stress eating and emotional eating? Like, how do you, what's going on between the mind and body when we're craving?
Well, let me say that I've had quite an evolution in this way. That I originally thought, in my suffering, thought that the mind and the body were intimately connected with regards to overeating, and that I had to fix the hole in my heart before I could stop trying to fill the hole in my stomach. And
Right.
I really went on a soulful spiritual journey through psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, Overeaters Anonymous, all types of, endeavors, which I don't regret, which made me the person I am today, but it did not help me with my food. Then I happened upon a kind of cognitive technique, which was purely thought-based. I set up a tripwire by making very specific rules so that I would know when, I should back up and say that I came to understand that the brain is really bifurcated into, reptilian versus, mammalian and neocortex. And the reptilian brain is very primitive, the seat of survival mechanisms. Yeah. Fight or flight, feast or famine, eat, mate, or kill. It's like a bad college drinking game. It looks at something in the environment and it says, do I eat it? Do I mate with it? Or do I kill it? And this part of the brain has the ability to push the rational part aside. And so I thought I needed a tripwire rather than trying to kill my inner wounded child or love myself thin. I needed a tripwire to recognize when that was happening. And so I made, embarrassingly so for a sophisticated psychologist with credentials like mine, I summoned into existence what I would call my inner pig.
I was reading that in your book. I want to know more about the pig, because to me that's a derogatory term, but you use it everywhere.
I do. And there is a reason for it to be derogatory. I wanted to know when my reptilian brain was active. So I would make rules that would say something like, I will never eat chocolate on a weekday again. Very hard and fast rules.
Never. Yeah.
And that way I would know that any thought, feeling, impulse, or image that suggested that I was going to have chocolate on a Wednesday, like, for example, if I'm at Starbucks and I saw a chocolate bar at the counter and I heard a voice that said, you worked out hard enough, go ahead, a few bites won't hurt, and you can start your silly diet tomorrow. I would say, wait a minute, that's not me. That's my inner pig, and it's squealing for pig slop. A chocolate on a Wednesday is pig slop. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. I know now that the whole purpose of that, the reason this worked for me, and I was not going to teach this stuff, this was just a very private thing. The whole purpose of that was to break apart stimulus and response, open up a space between stimulus and response. Overeating has to do with this kind of automation of calorie acquisition. The brain is being very efficient and, trying to keep us alive by automating the acquisition of calories. Unfortunately, while that was a survival advantage 100,000 years ago, it's a disadvantage in today's modern food environment. But I opened up this space. What I did with that space was cognitively refute all the things my pig was saying. That's how I got better personally. I decided I had to fix my thinking about food. It didn't have anything to do with what happened to me as a child. And it didn't have to do with my inner soul. I just had to fix my thinking so I wouldn't have these excuses anymore. And so, for example, I would say, it's not really true. The pig says it'll be just as easy to start my diet tomorrow, but it's not really true, because if you have a craving for chocolate and you think just start tomorrow, and then you eat chocolate, by the principle of neuroplasticity, you've reinforced the craving and you've reinforced the thought. So you're more likely to say, I'll start tomorrow, and you're more likely to have a stronger craving tomorrow. So if you're in a hole, man, you got to stop digging. Always use the present moment to be healthy, right? That's how I recovered. It wasn't an instant miracle, but by having an aversive conception of that reptilian part of my brain, I would wake up and say, oh, that thing is in charge again. I don't want it to be in charge any more than I want my bladder to be in charge, right? Like if I really had to pee now, I would tell my bladder, look, I'm talking to Greg. I'll get to you later. I'm the boss. You're not the boss of me. Even though it's a biological organ that creates very strong drives, I'm not going to let it be in charge, because I want to be in charge of my life as an adult in a civil society. Same thing with food. Why can't I do that? So I decided that rather than looking at the fire of emotions as something that I had to fix or put out, what if I could just build a good fireplace around it by stopping my pig from poking holes in it so no ashes could get out? And a roaring fire in a well-contained fireplace in the living room is an asset, not a liability. So I said, it's going to take me years and years, and I've tried to fix, all my traumas and everything that ails me, and I've learned a lot from that, but it's not helping with my food. Let me try a purely cognitive thing. And I would say, maybe the mind and body are really not as connected as I thought. Okay. It worked for me. Over the course of many years, it worked for me. 8 years later, I'm getting divorced. I'm thin, relatively thin. I'm not having nearly as much trouble with overeating. I experiment with all kinds of different rules, and I've just really figured it out for me. I published the book, get 1 million readers, get on Psychology Today, get another 1 million readers, wind up with this, coaching agency. We've worked with 2,000 people over the course of the 8 years following that, like from 2016 to now. And for the bulk of that time, I concentrated on fixing people's thinking about food like I did, up until the last year or two. And we looked at the results carefully in the last year or two, and they weren't what I wanted them to be. In the first month, they were terrific. I would find that people get an 89.4% reduction in overeating behavior in the first month if they engage with their coach in the program. At the 6-month mark, it was still pretty good, but it was more like 55%. And it was bimodal. There were people who had kind of quit entirely and people that kept doing it. The people that kept doing it were doing well. The people that quit entirely were not. But why were people quitting? That's what really bothered me, because this seemed like a miracle to me. So I started to look at why people were quitting, and I would interview them in detail, when they would get the screw it, just do it response. So
I know it well.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. Because at some point, inevitably, you run up across this feeling where you say to yourself, well, I know I don't have any excuses for this. I've looked at all the things my pig is telling me, and I know why they're all wrong, but oh, well, what the hell? Screw it. Just do it. I need this now. I'm just going to do it. And I would investigate what happened before that response occurred. So I kind of zeroed in on that response, and I'd investigate. And what I found was that inevitably it had to do with some type of physiological organismic distress, right? The biggest culprit was poor nutrition. People were skipping meals. They were concentrating on things that didn't have enough, vitamins and minerals and high order foods and having too much processed stuff.
So do I understand the body is wanting proper nutrition, and we're not giving it because we're using empty calories?
That's a big part of it. That's a big part of it, yeah. And the more regularly people can flood their body with nutrition at a slight caloric deficit if they want to lose weight, the less often they get that screw it, just do it response. It's the hardest thing to get people to change, but it's the biggest culprit. I would find that sense of overwhelm would do this also. So if you had too many decisions to make over the course of a day, you would be prone to that organismic screw it, just do it response. And that's because willpower is not like a genetic gift. It's more like gas you wake up with in the tank every day. And you burn it every time you make a decision, not just food decisions. People have trouble resisting marshmallows after you make them do math problems. So every time you are deciding what to do with an email, do I spam it? Do I reply to it? Do I delegate it? Do I refer it? You're burning some brain power. You're burning some glucose in your brain. It's a little bit less willpower you're going to have. Food decisions, certainly over the course of the day, burn willpower. So does who's going to take Jenny to soccer practice, and are we going to watch Teletubbies or, something else tonight? So I would have people start to take decision-free breaks during the day. Step outside for 10 minutes, turn off your computer, put your phone away, go hide in the bathroom if you have to, but don't make decisions for 10 minutes and just kind of breathe and think and figure out what's next. That made a big difference also. I found that people were dehydrated. They weren't drinking enough water, and that they'd be more likely to have a screw it, just do it response if they were dehydrated, if they were fatigued, if they were too isolated for too long. Basically our brains are set up to override our rational decisions if it perceives that there's an emergency, erroneously or otherwise. And, what's essentially happening is that the brain says, we need resources. Life is too difficult. We need resources. You better get more calories because you never know when they're going to be available again. Even though we live in an environment where there are 100,000 calories available for 43 cents, downstairs if I go to the convenience store, and across the street there's another convenience store. Our brains are still living in a primitive world. And when you deprive it of resources like that, or you tax it too much. So essentially it was like, if I go back to the bladder analogy, you can only make so strict a rule about your bladder before your bladder will take over, right? Like I can say, I'm going to wait until the end of this meeting to pee. And I don't have to pee, Greg, don't worry. But I could say, I could wait until the end of the meeting to pee. I can't say I'm never going to pee again. Because in 12 or 14 hours at the absolute max, my bladder is going to tell me otherwise. It's kind of like your body tells you otherwise, no matter what rules you try to adhere to, right, if you're not regulating and keeping that level of organismic distress to a reasonable amount. And it's just a fact of life. Our brains are not really separate entities. We're intertwined with our bodies in a very deep level, and you got to take care of yourself. And that's why most people need to, the cognitive work really helps. Setting up very specific tripwires so you know when it's happening, separating from those thoughts, like deciding that all thoughts that suggest that I'm going to break the rule are not me, they're this inner entity that only wants to break the rule and doesn't care about my well-being. Separating from those thoughts helps also, because now you're aware what thoughts you need to refute and what thoughts can get you in trouble, whereas most people don't have that awareness at all. But it's in the realm of what I'd call necessary but not sufficient. Makes a big difference. There are some types of overeating, some habits that you can overcome purely cognitively. But eventually, if you really want to have a totally different relationship with food, you need to consider your body as well.
Thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting how you're taking kind of like a cognitive behavioral approach. And I get that as a therapist. But what occurs to me is there's a lot of names floating around about what's in your books. So, for example, I sometimes say I'm a binge eater, but I don't really think that's what's going on. I think I'm more of an emotional eater. Uh-huh. Then there's the term comfort food, relationship with food. Uh-huh. How, like cognitively in our minds, how should we look at our relationship with food if it's unhealthy? Do those phrases fit?
There are a whole bunch of very serious questions there, so I'm going to talk for a little while, but please interrupt me if you need clarification. Okay?
No problem. Go for it.
Okay. I once read an article for Psychology Today about my concern about the diagnosis of eating disorders. There's no question that they're discrete clinical entities. So I feel like it's important that we have these diagnoses. But for example, because then we can study medications and we can study different interventions and what works for them. However, depending upon what study you look at, 2 to 4% of the population meets the criteria for binge eating disorder. And it leads to the question for most people, well, do I have a serious problem or not? Am I, is this something I need to do something about?
Right.
And the vast majority of the population will get a negative answer to that. We'll say, no, you don't have a serious problem because you don't meet all the criteria for binge eating disorder, like hating yourself afterwards and feeling like you're out of control and, a certain frequency and sense of self-disgust. Most people will not meet all those criteria. However, 40% of the population is obese, according to the World Health Organization. Diabetes and cancer and heart disease are, depending on what study you look at it, going around double what it used to be. Mm-hmm. People are having heart attacks and strokes and becoming disabled and living horrible second halves of their life, sometimes first halves of their life, for things that are diet reversible and preventable. Or if nothing, diet slowable. Like you can slow the progression. And so I think it's the wrong question. I think that the question, do I have an eating disorder, is not really what you want to ask if you're thinking about should you apply a system like this, because the question is, am I eating beyond my own best judgment and would I like more control? And it's not whether I'm sick, but how do I strengthen my eating muscles so that I can make intellectual decisions about the things that I want to eat or not eat and in what amounts, so I can eat by design rather than eating on impulse and whim and emotion. Okay. So that's my biggest point about the clinical entities of, but I still think we should have them, but I think people should ask other questions. I think if you're talking about gastric surgery or taking a medication or other things like that, then yes, you ask yourself, do I have a clinically diagnosable eating disorder? But if you're talking about general health and well-being and, should I use a non-invasive thought technique in order to gain more control, be closer to the weight that I want to be, feel like I'm eating healthier things and nourishing my body, I always feel like, why not? So that's the question I would suggest people ask. The second piece of that had to do with emotional eating or comfort eating.
Right.
Okay. When the digestive system is overloaded with food, overloaded with tasks, the nervous system has difficulty conducting the emotions. So there is a direct mind-body connection to what you feel depending upon what you eat. If you overload your digestive system, you're not going to feel the same level of anxiety or anger or sadness, or because your nervous system just can't conduct the emotions in the same way. So there is an anesthetic effect of food, of overeating.
An anesthetic effect?
Yeah, it quote unquote numbs you out a little bit.
Oh, okay.
However, that's not all that's going on. That's not all that's going on. You're not eating just for comfort. And I can prove that to you by asking, if you were to go to the dentist and the dentist was out on Novocaine and he said, do you mind if I inject you with a bagel instead? You would think that was really silly, because the bagel is doing something. It's not really numbing you out. It's an artificial concentration of pleasure. We didn't have bagels on the savannah. We didn't have chocolate bars on the savannah. We didn't have, chips and pizza and pasta on the savannah.
Right. Once again, in many ways, we have a primitive part of our brain that still we have to deal with, right? In a modern world. We do. And like Jack Rippey says, we live astride of an animal. Well, there's this primitive part of our brain that we all have to live with. And that's a level of pleasure that the brain is not evolutionarily prepared to deal with. Another word for that would be a drug. Eating, all these things are legal, but it's the same impact that a drug has. It's an artificial concentration of pleasure. Your brain lights up and says, give me more, give me more, give me more, because it thinks this is what's keeping you alive. Remember, we evolved in an environment where food was probably much scarcer. And if you could find this many calories in this small space for this little effort, you damn well better, go get it, because you don't know when it's going to happen again. So you're actually eating to get high with food. And I tell people to consider, if you're overeating especially on industrial foods or very highly concentrated foods, ask them to consider changing their paradigm from saying I'm numbing out or emotionally escaping to I'm eating to get high with food. Because if you say that you're just an emotional eater, then you're going to feel sorry for yourself. And you're likely to give your pig a really good excuse for saying, oh, poor me, you have to feed me. I'm so sad. I'm so lonely. I'm so anxious. Yeah.
But if you say you're getting high with food, you'll say, I don't want to be a drug addict.
That's really interesting, because a majority of the work I've done as a therapist is an addiction. So this is really, really interesting for me. And I think for the listeners as well. You're saying that we get high on food. So let's equate this concept to someone that's getting high on cocaine. What is the similarity? What is the difference? Because working in this field, we know through the science of addiction that there's a part of your brain that is saying, we need cocaine to survive here, Greg, go get it. That's what happens after a while of using cocaine. So are you saying that we get high on food similarly to? Very much so. Very much so. I think it's even the same part of the brain. Cingulate, you would know more about this than me, the cingulate gyrus, or I think I'm familiar. Yeah. Well, basically there's that lizard brain, right? How you refer to it, right? Yeah. That the primitive part of the brain. I know enough neurology to be dangerous. That's me too. but I do know that it's a very similar part of the brain.
And look, it makes sense. 100,000 years ago, this was an asset. We needed to light up when resources were available. If we didn't get incredibly strong cravings, we wouldn't have been motivated to hunt and gather and do the things that were necessary to survive. And so the people who had stronger cravings were more likely to survive. And that's why I always tell people, strong food cravings are not a sign of a disease. They're a sign of a healthy body trying to do its job in the context of a very sick modern food environment. Where you're
asking for the good stuff.
Asking for the good stuff, man. That's what it's doing.
The nutritious stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it's asking. Now, it doesn't know the good stuff is not there, because in nature, there's a lot of predation going on in industry. And it mimics predation in nature. So I worked with a food bar manufacturer many, many years ago. And this is just one example of hundreds. I worked in the food industry for...
Yeah, you were a CEO of a company that did research.
I was.
In the food industry,
research. Yeah, I was. Yeah. I was on the wrong side of the war. I was helping to sell bad stuff and trying to make up for it now. But anyway, one example of what goes on in the industry was taking the vitamins out of the bar and putting money into the packaging. So not paying for the vitamins in the bar, putting money in the packaging, making the packaging look diverse and vibrant and multicolored, so that it would stimulate the eat the rainbow reflex inside of us. Because in nature, diverse, multicolored vegetables, fruits would signal a diversity of micronutrients that are available. So we have a variety impulse. We look for that. And it lights up the go get it, go get it part of our brain. Here they're doing that, but they took the nutrition out of it. And so they're lighting up that part of the brain, make us feel this kind of sense of bliss, but they're not giving us enough nutrition to feel satisfied. And that's a big part of creating the addiction. And in nature, it would be hard to find a reasonable amount of calories without nutrition. It would come packaged with all the fruits and vegetables, sometimes with an animal. And you'd have a variety of cofactors and coenzymes and things that were available. But we've developed these techniques for isolating pieces and parts of that, not really providing the nutrition and providing an awful lot of calories without the nutrition. And so our brain is very confused. It's very, very confused. And that's a big part of the addiction. And the brain wants to automate these habits. I always tell people your brain is a calorie acquisition machine, because in nature you get everything you need when you have enough calories. It's doing its best that it can to create automatic loops so you don't have to think about it, right? And that's another reason why you need something very powerful and aversive to wake you up when this is going on, if you don't want to, just go along for the ride. And I always tell people, if you don't have, I forgot who said this. You know who said this? If you don't have a plan, you're part of someone else's.
I've heard the phrase.
You need to make a very specific plan. Okay. There's one more thing about emotional eating one more point I wanted to make. And I know I'm jumping around on your outline a little bit. So
no worries. No. This is free flowing. This is a conversation. Don't worry about it. Don't even look at it.
Okay. So most people think that emotional overeating is a one-way phenomenon. I feel angry. I'm going to eat at you, right? I'm going to overeat to suppress that anger. I'm too unhappy, depressed. I'm going to overeat to suppress the depression. It might surprise you to know that it goes both ways. So there's a principle in psychology called operant conditioning.
Oh, yes.
And because the brain is a calorie acquisition machine, it's also evaluating what physiological states occur before you require calories. So let's take anxiety. Anxiety has a very discrete physiological correlate, a set of physiological correlates. Your blood pressure goes up a little bit. Your galvanic skin response would become more measurable. Your respiration, your perspiration. It's very, very measurable. When we take animals and we give them sugar rewards, this is kind of I always wonder about these sick scientists that are making up these studies. But,
these guys that are just abusing rats and just giving them things and electrodes. Yeah,
I know. So there are studies where, for example, you take baboons and you give them a sugar reward whenever their blood pressure is high. And what happens is when they get the sugar reward, the blood pressure goes down a little bit. But when you measure their blood pressure day in and day out, not just when you're giving them the sugar reward, that group of baboons has higher blood pressure than the baboons who were not given the sugar reward. So their body has learned to produce higher blood pressure to create anxiety, because anxiety seems to lead to the sugar reward. So it might be that if you feel like you can't sleep without having a load of carbohydrates, mass quantities of carbohydrates,
right,
that you're actually creating the anxiety by having that load of carbohydrates. And that if you would push through and have a couple of sleepless nights, but show your body that that reward is not available, it might be you'd enter an extinction curve and you'd find that you're less anxious than you thought that you were. I've had numerous people tell me that they got better sleep by stopping that belief that they have to have carbs to go to sleep. Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
No problem. So what I understand, Glenn, is that in time, and imagine a lot of people don't realize this, is that there's a feedback loop and a reinforcement that goes on, right? How long does it take to break out of that loop, in your opinion? Because you work with many clients, roughly 2,000 clients have had success with your books and your method. So how do we break out of that loop?
I find with sleep, it goes a little quicker than with other types of food signals. Okay. In order to explain that, I want to explain the extinction curve. And in order to explain that, I need to help you understand exactly how cravings work. So let me take you back 100,000 years ago and introduce you to a caveman we will call Thag, T-H-A-G, just because I like the name.
That's a pretty good name, yeah.
I mean, when I have a kid, then it's little Thag is going to be he'll get picked on in school. So Thag one day is out in the forest looking for food, and he sees a monkey, and he follows the monkey to a tree and finds bananas. Gorges himself on bananas, takes a whole bunch of bananas home to his family. Everybody's happy. The next time he sees a monkey, Thag's brain lights up, because the brain is looking for signals that food is available. And he actually starts to feel happy and motivated to follow the monkey before he gets to even see the bananas. So follows the monkey, that day finds more bananas. Thag now has a habit, he salivates when he sees the monkeys, and he's running to the tree. Okay. Now, suppose it's later in the season, after 40, 50 days, and the bananas are scarce. They're not there anymore in all the trees. And one day he follows a monkey, and it leads to a barren tree. And Thag is all, upset. Most people think at that point, Thag's brain would start to let go and the cravings would start to go down.
Right.
Because the monkey's not leading to... But that's not really what happens. Because in reality, all the trees wouldn't go barren at once. What's happened is it's become harder to find bananas by following monkeys, not impossible. And it's still an evolutionary survival advantage to follow a monkey to a tree that has bananas 80% of the time, as compared to not having any food signal at all, and just randomly going to look for bananas on your own. As a matter of fact, it would be an advantage to follow a monkey to a tree 50% of the time, or even 20% of the time. What's happened when the trees start to go barren is that the reward becomes intermittently available at random. It turns out that what Thag's brain will do is work harder than ever to motivate Thag to chase the monkeys, because it's testing to see whether the monkeys are still a good sign, but it's just in a more difficult environment. This turns out to be the most reinforcing schedule in behavioral literature. Variable ratio intermittent random reinforcement is the most reinforcing. It's how you get compulsive behavior, when things are randomly reinforced. This is why you see little old ladies at the casinos in Las Vegas sitting in pulling the slot machines all day long. Got to be there. I don't know when it's going to hit up, but I got to be there. Got to be there. Sometimes they even have fights about it because they think it's going to be available now. But
because they would have intermittently got, a payoff on that slot machine.
Yes.
Right. And they're looking for that again, even though it's random.
Right. And that's where the compulsion comes in, because my brain is testing to see, do I have a intermittent signal available? And, I don't want to give that up if that's the case. So, okay, now let's talk about a craving. So let's say that I am going for pizza every day on the way home from work. I pass the pizza place. I get this irresistible craving. I go in, I have 4 or 5 slices, and I'm developing a little punch. And so I decide that I'm going to have to extinguish this. So I make a rule that I'm never going to go to that pizza place again, right? And I pass by, and you'd think that what would happen is it would be really the hardest on the first day, but it's actually not. You have a little bit of a honeymoon period, right? And then what happens is your brain says, where the F is my pizza, right? Like, where did it go? Like, is it intermittently available? And it says, boom, 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 boom. Worst cravings that you ever had. Because I'm not going to let go. This pizza place was always a really good signal for the availability of a food reward. I'm not going to let go of that, without a fight. So now it's called an extinction burst, or the where the F is my pizza response. And then if you get through that, it starts to come down in a fairly straight line. And then the brain will try a couple of more times at the end of like 20 to 30 exposures. When you're done with that, your brain will label the food signal as dormant. It won't erase it. So if you decide to stop at that pizza place again, you're going to have to go through the whole extinction curve again. So don't go back and visit your friends if you escape from prison. But it will label it as dormant, and you won't be bothered by it anymore. Okay. So there are a number of implications here. The first thing is be prepared for the response. Be prepared for the extinction curve. And if we go back to the theory of organismic distress and the screw it, just do it response, you see how important it is to go in prepared. Don't go into a battle with a plastic helmet. Say I'm going to extinguish this pizza problem. And over this next 30 days, especially in the 4 to 10 day area, I'm going to take extra good care of myself. I'm going to eat a little more during that period. I'm not going to try to lose weight because I don't want my body to be too hungry. I'm just going to eat more healthy food. I'm going to make sure I'm drinking enough water, getting enough sleep. I'm going to take my decision-free breaks. I'm going to do some parasympathetic breathing. We can talk about that later, how you can use your breath to calm your brain down. But I'm going to do everything I can to keep myself in a state of organismic calm so that when this hits, then I'm ready for it. And then I'm going to push all the way through. So that's the first thing. Most people give up at this point. They say, or their pig tells them they're going to be tortured like this forever and it's too hard. Unfortunately, when you do that, what have you done? You've taught your brain that the reward is intermittently available. So you've made the addiction worse. And that's what everybody does because they think it's going to be too hard. So expect it, ride it all the way out. The other problem that people have is when they get towards the end, they think, I've got this. They
get confident.
They get overconfident and they say, I'm going to go back and try it again. And boom, they have to go through the whole curve again. So don't get over frightened at the top of the extinction curve. Don't get overconfident at the bottom. If you decide that you want this thing to be labeled dormant, let it label it dormant. Some people will say, I don't want to give up pizza entirely. And that's okay. You don't have to. Most people don't have to. Some people do. The extinction cravings are specifically connected to food signals. So I might have extinguished the pizza place as a food signal for pizza, but maybe 2 months later, my dad invites me to come over to his house and play poker, and he's got pizza there, and he used to have that all the time. And suddenly I have this horrible craving for pizza.
Right.
If I didn't know about how cravings worked, I would think that I failed. And again, I'm going to have this horrible craving for pizza. But I didn't fail. I succeeded at extinguishing the pizza place as a food signal for pizza. I just had not extinguished my father's place as a signal for pizza. So on a practical basis, what you want to do is decide when and where you're going to have pizza, in what amounts, and what are the signals that you're going to allow, what you're not going to allow, and then stick to it and work it through. If I were to say, I'll only ever have pizza at my father's place and only two slices and only after I've worked out, then eventually my brain will extinguish every other food signal except for that combination. It's kind of like if there was a casino that only paid off at 10 o'clock on Saturday mornings, you would see that those slot machines are empty all week long. You would not see those little old ladies there anymore, but you see a rush on Saturday mornings. That's how the brain works with cravings. Okay. I forgot the original question. What was
Maybe
the
if we
original
can tie it in, because you I'm just talking like just openly. What you described is exactly what we describe to clients regarding addiction. So if you can tie it in, maybe loop it back to Greg, you mentioned before about cocaine addiction. There's definitely similarities to talk about that, but also what the difference is because we don't need cocaine for nutrition. But yeah, just take it from there.
Well, I mean, I think, Greg, you were asking me about the similarities and differences between cocaine and
right.
Yeah. There's someone out there who works with black and white drug and alcohol addictions with very similar techniques. Same as Jack Trimpey, wrote a book called Rational Recovery, and I always recommend people go there rather than try to use techniques for the black and white addictions. There are many differences, and there are a lot of similarities. I think food is more addictive than cocaine.
No, really? Wow.
I do. Because it's perfectly legal. It's cheap. It's something that you as they say in the addictive circles, you have to take the lion out of the cage and walk it around the block 3 times a day, right? You can't just give it up entirely. And so you're going to have to create rules and conditions under which you can eat this and can't eat that. And it requires a little bit more finesse and thought in order to define what the bullseye really is. And you're constantly exposed to the food stimuli. Not that you're not exposed to stimuli with cocaine, but you can stop going to crack houses and
right. You have a little bit of control over it there. Yeah.
So I think that it's the same part of the brain that we're working with. I think it's the same survival impulse. When you're talking about crack cocaine, for example, the organ of the body that gets addicted is a little different. In both cases, there's a biological error where the brain is making a biological error. But with regards to crack cocaine, the brain thinks that the cocaine is oxygen, and it's fighting to survive by breathing the oxygen. And this is why people are violent with regards to crack cocaine, but they're not really violent with regards to donuts. Although if you met my nephew, you might think otherwise.
I've been a little aggressive to get my donut.
Yeah. But they're both making a biological error. And in food addiction, it's the stomach that's making a biological error, or the the blood sugar, where it's thinking this is where the survival stuff is. Knowing that there is a similarity, I actually was able to create a way to get over a binge quicker, understanding that the survival drive had been fooled and wrenched away from what it's supposed to be pointed at. I once heard Jack Trimpey talking about people giving up cigarettes or crack, and that it was very helpful for them to take a deep breath, and sigh it out. Mm-hmm. Why does that work? Because they're giving their body actual oxygen rather than crack cocaine.
Right.
And they're showing the body that the good stuff actually is available. With regards to food, if you've had a binge and your survival drive has been, taken to all those bags and boxes and containers, if you take a half pound of leafy greens, assuming there's no medical reason you can't do this, if you take a half pound of leafy green vegetables, usually dark leafy greens, blend them up with some water and drink them down like medicine, you'll find yourself not craving more and not constantly obsessing as much about keeping the binge going. That's been kind of like a miracle for a lot of people. It certainly was for me. So yes, there are similarities. The difference is you're not going to wake up in a cell with 4 gray walls and your new husband Bubba because you had too many donuts. but you could with cocaine.
All of what you're talking about, because I went through your book. I can't say, I'll be honest, I didn't read everything, but what I did read is points that you're touching on here in this episode. And it sounds like this book, because you have many, is that some research kind of changed the way that you look at things. And this book is available for listeners. Defeat Your Cravings, The Backdoor to Weight Loss. What else could they benefit from in this book other than what you're covering today?
Well, I just told you that I use rules, but I didn't talk about all the reasons that people object to it and why it's so hard for people to use rules. So maybe we could talk about that. And that's all in the book also. First of all, I suggest you start with one simple rule. Rather than trying to construct a whole diet that's going to take your weight off immediately, which doesn't work, by the way. That creates the organismic distress. Also, if you're trying to lose 30 pounds in 30 days, that it puts you into a panic, and it almost never works. So that's
the diets. So diets don't work.
We need to let go of the diet mentality. We really do, unless there's a medical emergency, which sometimes there is, but 98% of the time I find a lot more success when people say, okay, I'm going to get off of this feast and famine roller coaster. I'm going to stop dieting and then overeating and dieting and overeating and dieting and overeating.
Right.
I'm just going to steadily take care of my body and flood it with nutrition, and the weight will come off over time. What's most important is who's in control, me or my inner pig or food monster. And if you start with something simple, just for the first week or two, like I'll never go back for seconds, or which is what I heard this truck driver once did. He was about 150 pounds overweight, and he had to eat at fast food restaurants all day long because he was on the road. So they can't stop doing that, but I'll tell you what, I won't go back for seconds. And he was able to do that. He ate fast food all day long, but didn't go back for seconds. He got some very significant results. And as a result of seeing himself never go back for seconds, he suddenly went from someone who felt out of control and hopeless and despairing to someone who could be in control of his eating. It's right. A different way of life. Even if you're not taking off a ton of weight, it's a different way of life.
Yeah. Just that sense of you're gaining control of your life, where before you thought, okay, this is just an endless thing. I'm going to eat junk food and go for seconds. This is just the way it is. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, actually, there are things that I can do, I have control over.
Right. And then there's something that happens. Your identity function will kick in.
What's that?
You will observe yourself you'll observe yourself not going back for seconds, day in and day out, because it's an easy enough thing to do.
Okay.
And then your brain starts to say, I must be someone who doesn't go back for seconds. I must be the kind of person who doesn't go back for seconds. So the brain is looking to save energy and automate things. And character is what we habitually do at the moment of impulse. And our identity is like the culmination of all those behaviors. So the brain is looking for, how can I automate this and make less decisions necessary? What else would someone who doesn't go back for seconds do? Well, maybe someone who doesn't go back for seconds, maybe they have a salad once in a while, right? Or maybe they walk around the block at night, right? Like I must care about myself. I must be someone who actually cares about my health. And the power of identity and character really trumps willpower. This is what makes it possible to not feel like you have these Nazi food policemen living in your head saying, you will not go back for the seconds, right?
Yeah,
and nobody wants to live like that.
Yeah. That's an extreme. Yeah. Yeah.
And you can kind of not have to white knuckle it like that anymore and get to the point where this is just who you are. Originally I wound up deciding I couldn't have chocolate at all, and it seemed impossible. But then eventually I started saying, well, I'm just someone who doesn't eat chocolate. And if I ask people, could you give up chocolate entirely? They'll say, no way. That's ridiculous. I'll say, could you become someone who doesn't eat chocolate? They'll say, maybe I could.
Interesting.
Because we intuitively know that character trumps willpower. And people make decisions all the time. We have vegans, we have people who are kosher, or for their religion, they don't eat a particular thing. And they make those decisions, one day, and then they feel committed to it because they're committed to God or the animals or some type of, moral conviction. And then they're committed to it the rest of their life. They've become someone, they've become a different person. And that goes all the way back to your question about your relationship with food, right? Right,
because that's a common phrase we use, right? I got to work on my relationship with food, right?
Am I in control or is the food in control? Am I on a seafood diet where I just see something and eat it as part of this automatic behavior loop, letting my lower brain be in control? Or do I have a commitment to open up that space between stimulus and response and act there?
Pause?
Pause, sure.
Is that what you mean? Like between stimulus and response, so something that is attractive and responding to it. Is there a pause that we need to put in there?
Yeah. Well, that's the first way that I opened up the pause was with that tripwire and with the rule.
Ah, okay.
But in later years, when I recognized that people really did need to pause, and that there were other things I could do with the pause, I developed a methodology for helping them to pause. So the first thing is to recognize that it's not natural. If there's a big, hot, steaming pile of food in front of you, it's natural to want to just chow down. It's not natural to want to pause and do anything else. So this is not supposed to feel right at first. However, you can work on the muscle that de-automates your food problems if you will teach yourself to pause on a regular basis before you eat. It can be as simple as going 1, 2, 3. So I
really?
have
1, 2, 3. Like that's a pretty short pause. I'm assuming that you have to kind of walk away from the table for a half hour, but you're saying 1, 2, 3. That seems pretty quick.
It's the difference between being in the automatic loop or not.
Huh.
It's a different way of life, right? And some people, that's all they do. They teach themselves to go 1, 2, 3. And in those 3 seconds, you become a little more mindful, a little more present. You move from a state of urgent doing, got to eat the food, it's an emergency,
right,
to more relaxed being. When you're in a state of relaxed being or mindfulness, when you're eating, you're more likely to absorb the nutrition. Pay attention to your cues when you're, hungry and full. So you're more likely to have less food, more likely to feel satisfied with less food. But more importantly, you're more likely to be able to pause when you're driving down the road and you pass, a potato chip sign, and your brain wants to automate the behavior to go into the supermarket and get.
Or the big yellow M.
Or
right?
the big yellow M. Yeah. So the other things you can do with the pause are you can breathe. Like after you have a pause muscle that's strong enough to give you 3 seconds before you eat. And you can wait weeks before you start this. Once you're comfortable with that, you can breathe in for a count of 7 and out for a count of 11. If you
Once
breathe
again,
out,
putting oxygen in, like you said before, right?
And also showing the brain that there's no emergency. If you were running from a hungry bear, you couldn't breathe out for longer than you breathed in. You'd be going as fast as I can, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're calming the brain. There are actually 2 parts to our nervous system. There's the sympathetic system, which revs us up for emergency action, fight or flight, feast or famine. And then there's the part of our brain that calms us down and says it's okay to rest and digest and think rationally and plan for the future. And so you want to get good at stimulating the part of your brain that says it's okay to rest and digest and think rationally, because that's how you make better food choices. So if you start doing some breathing, what you can also do in that pause, once you have even more space, is you can think of the worst things that your pig says, like 1 bite won't hurt.
Right.
And you can think of what the refutation is for that. 1 bite is a tragedy. It's the difference between who's in charge, you or me, Mr. Pig.
Right.
Or just 1 bite.
The pig says just one, but 1 is too many, 1,000 is never enough, right?
Uh-huh.
I read that in your book.
I didn't make that up. I got that from some of the addiction programs. And if you say those things before you eat, remember your body and your brain is always looking for what happens right before you eat. You're going to start thinking those things more reflexively when you do eat. The principle of operant conditioning.
Right.
So rather than allowing the pig to say one bite won't hurt and then going to have the potato chips, which reinforces what the pig wants, you can reinforce what you want to be thinking, which is one bite is a tragedy. So if you pause, if you go 1, 2, 3, and you take a breath, and then you say one bite is a tragedy before you eat every time, you're conditioning your brain to think one bite is a tragedy. One bite offline is a tragedy when you when that urge arises. And so that's another way you can get more control. So the pause is very important. The pause is very important too. Yeah.
So do you think overall the message in your book is that we have more control over our overeating and craving? Is that the main message, or?
I do not think we are powerless. I think I think the food industry and the advertising industry is very powerful. Right. I think it feels like we are powerless. I think it feels like there must be something wrong with us, like we have some crazy disease, but I do not think that we do. I think that we have succumbed to the language and the advertising and a culture where everybody thinks it's okay to slowly kill themselves with food and say they can't really do anything about it. Mm-hmm. But I think that with a little bit of hard work, not a lot of hard work, for a couple of months, that you can change virtually any eating habit that you want to and feel like you're in control. And, people don't believe me about this. You just kind of have to try it. You don't have to believe me at first because it really does feel like I was as desperate as anybody. I used to go through 7 drive-thrus to make sure nobody knew what I was doing. And
well, I read that you were in your 20s, you were 300 pounds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My early 30s, mid 30s,
yeah.
I was stranger. Yeah. I ate food off the floor. I always told people it added flavor, it was still kind of humiliating. Eat out of the garbage, eat my roommate's food. I was as desperate as anybody. And I felt like I couldn't do anything about it, but I could, and I did, and you can. Mm-hmm. So that's my opinion.
Yeah. For many things in life, it's funny. You mentioned the addiction world. In the addiction world, they often talk about, well, it was a poem to begin with, but it is considered to be a prayer, is the Serenity Prayer. I'm not sure if you've heard of that before, right? Which really kind of wraps this whole thing up because it's about, trying to find the wisdom to know the difference between what I can control and what I can't control. And we struggle day in, day out with everything. And it looks like this is also included with how we eat. We need to find the wisdom to know that we do have control. And if something is out of control in our lives, we've got to let it go. But the good news here is that we can do something about we can do something about food that could be killing us.
Oh, yeah.
We can stop the cycle. Basically.
You really can. If people are listening and they're frightened of the rules, I would encourage you. The book is free on my website in digital format. So I would encourage you to read the first couple of chapters of the book. I've got very powerful answers for those fears. I'm not insensitive to the fact that people are frightened of it. If you're worried about the word pig, I've got a good explanation of why you don't have to use it in the book, but why I did and what you do need to do.
Well, tell us now, because I'm really curious. I read it in your book, and then we mentioned it earlier on here, is that you, and they're not capital letters, but the first letter is capitalized, the pig within. And then slop has a capital S with it. That seems to be quite important. But once again, people would say, well, I'm not going to tell myself I'm a pig.
Well, but that's the whole point, is that you're separating from the part of you that feels out of control.
Okay.
I was raised by a Gestalt psychologist, and the principle in Gestalt psychology.
Well, it's in your family, right? It goes back generations. Everyone's a therapist.
There are 17 therapists in my family. And
my God.
Used to have my little friends come over when I was 9 years old and lie down on the couch and tell me about their mother. And I wish I was kidding, but I'm really not.
Oh, my God.
If something breaks in the house, everybody knows to ask it how it feels, but nobody knows how to fix it. That's my life.
How many therapists does it take to? Yeah, right. Okay.
One, but it really has to want to change.
That's a punchline.
I can tell you the ultimate Freudian slip joke also later on. What was I saying? We have similar senses of humor, so I got distracted.
No problem. We were trying to understand what the pig means.
What's important about it is that it's not you. And I was raised in a philosophy that said you have to integrate and love all parts of yourself. And I think that kept these techniques from me for 20 years. I think I suffered needlessly for 20 years because I felt like this would be too harsh. But when I realized that I am much more than my bladder or my testicles or any biological organ, and that I was, trying to love them and give them control that they don't deserve. Like you can't give your biological organs control in a civilized society. I can't go out and kiss an attractive woman on the street that I've never met before just because my testicles light up for it, right? I can't do that because I'm not that kind of person. I actually run the other way because I'm kind of shy. But when you have a technique that allows you to control it, you actually wind up feeling better about yourself, not worse. When a child learns to control their bladder and their bowels, and they can go potty in the toilet, we say, you're a big boy, you're a big girl. And we don't allow them to go to school before that, right? I mean, sometimes there are daycare centers and stuff, but they can't really participate in the machinations of society until they've developed that level of control. And the self-esteem that goes along with that is higher, not worse. You don't have to use the word the pig at all. It needs to be something that feels aversive to you, though, because it's such a primitive response for the lower brain to take over that you need something that really makes you wake up and say, who's in charge here?
So the idea is it is negative for a reason, right? Because we want to separate ourselves, and okay, I get it. Yeah.
And if you say that it's, Little Miss Piggy, or you're thinking that this is, you're trying to thank it all the time for helping you get through really hard times as a kid, which is all true. Like overeating helped me get through difficult times and traumas. And, you can intellectually recognize that, but if you want to use this technique, it's not going to work to constantly be trying to integrate and, love your inner wounded child back to health like that. You really do need to separate. That's what I found. And I found that the people who insist otherwise, which often includes therapists, by the way, I don't make as much progress with them. And, God bless. I want people to find a technique that works for them. Don't use this one if it really hurts your feelings too much. But I wouldn't dismiss it without like reading a couple of chapters of the book and seeing what you really think. Yeah.
Winding down here, I'd like to talk about how people can get in contact with you, your website, because you said the book that we're talking about, Defeat Your Cravings, is free on your website, you said?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So we're gonna talk about the website and other resources, but I got a really, really serious question to ask you based on what I read in the book.
Uh-huh.
Is that your dog had a bit of a problem. Your dog would sneeze and think of cheese.
Yeah.
What pairing? What kind of weird operant conditioning are you doing that you're torturing this dog?
It was an accident. This was my 125-pound Doberman Pinscher 20 years ago. And he was walking by the refrigerator, and I was eating a slice of cheese, and he happened to sneeze. So I gave him a piece of cheese, and he looked at me, kind of sat down, thought about it for a second. So then he sneezes again. And I gave him another piece of cheese because I'm a sick dude. And by the principle of operant conditioning, I had taught him to sneeze for cheese. If anybody was in front of the refrigerator, he would kind of walk up and sneeze in front of them. So,
wow.
Yeah, that was great.
So Pavlov was right.
That's more B.F. Skinner than Pavlov, but yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are calorie acquisition machines. We're hyper alert for what happens in our bodies, what behaviors, what thoughts occur before we acquire rich sources of calories. And you can use this to your benefit by having the pause and saying the things you want to say and the things that you want to think before you acquire calories, or you can let the pig use it to your detriment by saying the justifications and things that are going to cause you to feel okay about overeating. So understanding that principle can really help you. Yeah.
This is all making sense to me. I believe it will for the listener. And I got to tell the listener, I spent, 20 years working in addiction, and, Glenn explained the brain no different than I would. In fact, in some ways more eloquent. I may have got to borrow some of your, I might borrow some of the whole idea of of pizza and the pizza joint and how I help people understand addiction to drugs, which you very eloquently mentioned is very similar. So your book, Defeat Your Cravings, is on your website. And what is your website?
Ironically, it's defeatyourcravings.com.
Really? Wow. I'm glad you're so creative with it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. If you go to defeatyourcravings.com and you click the big blue button, sign up for the reader bonuses, and you will get not only a free copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format, but you will get a set of food plan starter templates. This is a diet agnostic philosophy. As long as you're willing to feed yourself, not trying to starve yourself, you can do this on, whole foods plant-based like I do, or ketogenic, or carnivore, or vegetarian, or point counting, or calorie counting, or macrobiotic. Whatever your dietary philosophy is, you can use this technique to help it stick. And I wanted you to have some example rules and templates that would show you what it looks like to do that. And then you will also get a set of recorded coaching sessions. This is all free.
Wow.
The reason I did that is because I know it sounds really harsh and weird. Like, why in the world does Greg have a doctor who has a pig inside of him on the show? What's wrong with Greg? What's wrong with this guy? But the truth is, it's a very compassionate, soulful, life-giving, hope-inspiring process that takes people from feeling powerless and despairing and confused and hopeless to feeling confident and enthusiastic and really hopeful that they can do this in one session. And I wanted you to hear how that happens, so I recorded a whole bunch of sessions for you. DefeatYourCravings.com, click the big blue button.
Absolutely. What occurs to me talking with you is that this is not a diet. I just want to emphasize this at the end, right? Because people may kind of brush this off and not look at the book. But this is not a new fad diet that you're talking about, right?
No.
No, not at all.
No, I actually encourage people away from fad diets. The only nutritional advice I really give is just try to get some processed foods out of your diet. I think if people
that might be a first step for people.
I feel like if people would stop fighting about whether we should eat plants or animals or, carnivore or vegetarian, whatever, and they would just focus on eating cleaner, I think that's 80% of the battle, at least in terms of binge eating. I think there are other issues, but at least in terms of binge eating, I think that's the 80% of the battle.
We'll wrap up with a quote that I saw in your book, and it must be important to you because you put it in there, among other quotes, but this quote was at the beginning, is from Democritus. So the quote is, "The brave man is he who overcomes not only his enemies, but his pleasures."
Yeah.
What does that mean, and why did you use that in your book?
The bane of my existence was my pursuit of toxic pleasure. If it wasn't for the extraordinary pleasure of chocolate and pizza and pasta and Pop-Tarts, I could have concentrated on so many other more meaningful things. I could have helped so many more people. I could have been a much better psychologist. I could have been a better husband. Toxic pleasure is more difficult than any other enemy that I've faced. I've encountered some bad people. I've made some bad business deals, gotten the short end of the stick a couple of times, but toxic pleasure has hurt me more than anything else in my life. And I just thought Democritus put it better than anyone else.
Yeah, very much so. And
it does take bravery. It's not an easy thing to do. It does take bravery to face it.
Oh, for sure. With many things in life, but definitely with this. I really appreciate your time and, explaining a little bit of key things that people would find in the book. And I really appreciate that you spent the time with us today. And I wish you all the best with the book. You have other books, so I really encourage people to go to Amazon.com or Amazon.ca.
I'd rather they started with this book, actually, because this is...
Oh, really? This is a starter book. Okay.
This is the latest book, which means it's got the benefit of all of the 2,000 clients that I worked with and
okay.
And all the science of overeating and addiction and getting through your cravings. The most popular book, 20,000 reviews and 1 million readers, was written as I was getting divorced in 2015, before I had experience working with all these clients. And it's really, really much more focused on thinking only. It's helpful. And if you want to read that after, that's okay. But Defeat Your Cravings is really what you should read if you want the benefit of all my experience. Most of the other books were written in 2019. There was 1 year that I wrote 6 books. I don't know what got into me. I'm going to kind of do it. And they're useful. You can go back and do that. But everything you need is in defeatyourcravings.com.
Fantastic. Glenn, thanks so much for coming in the studio today.
Thanks, man. It's good to be here.
So basically, what Glenn is saying is I have to call myself a pig.
Yeah. When he first talked about it, I thought, oh, that's kind of like a derogatory term, but he explained it. But Rob, you're a pig. No, well, actually, you aren't a pig. Is that there's a pig inside you.
Yes.
Wrapped up in bacon.
Wrapped up in a son of a baconator. But I liked what he was talking about, and this is what makes me laugh about last week's episode, is Glenn says you get high off food.
Yeah, exactly. And it boggles my mind. I work in addiction for many years, and I have clients that struggle with cocaine. And he says that actually you can become more, the addiction to food is stronger. And even though there's similarities, food is stronger than cocaine.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
There you go. You've been to your AA meetings. But he mentioned that. I mean,
yes.
We talked about it, but it's in his book, So, yeah, he did borrow from the addiction field. But, if people don't recognize it, that's the Serenity Prayer, which was a poem originally, but well known in AA. But basically what that means. And
I use it in everyday life, just so you know. Sometimes you can't change certain things and you just have to let it go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
the key thing is to have that wisdom to know the difference between things that you can and can't control.
And it goes back to what Dr. Glenn Livingston was talking about, too, was the ability to take a pause. So go 1, 2, 3. In other words, understand why you're pausing.
Yeah.
Tell your mind that, okay, I've got to pause, and then this soon will pass.
Absolutely. And another takeaway I had regarding my own eating is, how did he phrase it? Rest and digest, I think is what he said, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Very interesting, but very true. I've heard that before, where you think that, you're in front of a plate of food that I still want to eat. This tastes great, and you keep going. You don't necessarily have to keep going. If you pause for a bit, rest, and allow your body to digest a bit, then you get an idea how much more food needs to go in, right?
Yeah.
But I never really kind of wait for that. I just keep shoveling.
I get you. It's like I said, it's one of the most searched things on Google about weight loss, and a lot of people are struggling with it. And that's why today's interview with Dr. Glenn Livingston was, in my opinion, priceless, because another way, he doesn't like the word diet. He doesn't like the word diet. And I just like the way he looks at, the whole thing about food, and it's all psychological.
Mm-hmm. As he said, he's diet agnostic.
Yes.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Because diets don't work. But just kind of like wrapping up. There's one last thing that I thought was very interesting, because in my recovery from addiction, I believe in time, I did change my identity. And maybe I did that on purpose, or it was just part of the process. But I do know that today I do see myself and identify myself as someone that does not drink. And he talked about the power of changing all these things that we put inside our head psychologically, and just tell ourselves, if you decide that you do not want to eat chocolate anymore, that chocolate is out of your diet, that's okay. And the easiest thing to do is identify with that by saying, I'm a person that doesn't eat chocolate. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Never heard of it before.
It's like, as you were saying, like, as an alcoholic, you say, hi, I'm Rob and I'm an alcoholic. Is identifying what you are. Hi, I'm Greg, or hi, I'm Rob. I'm a chocoholic. So identifying what your downfalls are. Yeah.
Maybe in your case, you could eventually come to the identity as I'm Rob and I'm a person that doesn't eat bacon. Do you think you could actually do that? Is that?
And I'm afraid of canaries.
That's another old man phrase. But, I think the funny thing to wrap up here, I'm sure it'll give you a bit of a laugh, is that he talks about the pig inside of us.
Yeah.
And a number of times we talked about the amount of pig that you actually consume that is inside you in the way of a son of a baconator.
Son of a baconator.
We should get a kickback on Burger King for that, right?
Oh, no, not Burger King, Wendy's.
Oh.
Yes, it was Wendy's.
Wrong.
Yeah, it wasn't Burger King, it was Wendy's. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wendy's, if you're listening, please send my co-host Rob a dozen son of a baconators. Better yet, just the damn baconator. The father of the baconator.
Cravings.
That's a new commercial you have to voice, right?
Oh, yeah, I think so. You know what? I'll probably get the call this week for Wendy's. Hey, can you do our commercial for Wendy's?
Yeah.
Apparently you like the son of a baconator. And I'll go, yeah, I like getting high.
Because apparently you get high on food.
Oh, dear. No,
anyway.
Thanks for the laughs. And again, special thanks to our guest today, Dr. Glenn Livingston. You can check out his website, as he mentioned earlier, and check out his books. Amazing stuff.
Defeat Your Craving is the book, and the website and the links will be in the show description. So that's it for Right On.
Right On.
Right On. I'm glad you're assuring me and reinforcing that I'm right on.
I have to go out and get high now.
All this talk about food, eh? Well,
yeah, exactly. Thank you very much.
So, folks, stay healthy. Yes. In the meantime, be kind to yourself.
And most importantly, be well.
I bet you're going to be driving to Wendy's pretty soon here, Ron.
Gotta go, Greg. See you later.
Be sure to like and follow us on all social media. And if you like what you hear, hit subscribe, download, and share with your friends. Mind Body Matters is a great media production.